Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Diablo IV. I played on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Series S, Xbox One, PS4, PS5, and PC. So let's get into the story. You play as, well, whichever character you want to play as. They're generally referred to as the Wanderer. And while wandering, a spooky annihilation-style wolf, not a bear, finds you, saves you, and leads you to a town where you discover that Lilith, the daughter of hatred, has returned to Sanctuary. This kicks off a whole bunch of events where, well, basically you team up with some of the Haradrim to try and end Lilith and save Sanctuary. And I gotta say, Diablo 4's story actually was way better than I was expecting. I don't necessarily play the Diablo games for the story. I play them once for the story, and then I replay them multiple times for other reasons. Mostly because they're fun games to shut my brain off to. But in this one, it had a good story, although I will say with the ending, I'm not 100% into it. Not that I hated it or it ruined anything, I'm just like, I really want more. I want to know where that's going, what they're going to do with the story going on from there, and with the character that the ending really like revolves around. But overall, I will say I was happy with the story. Okay, so let's get into the audio, and the first thing I'm going to hit on is the voiceover work. Ralph Ineson, however you pronounce that dude just fucking kills it in this game. Any of the bits where he's narrating, it's perfect, quite frankly. Like, he just does such an awesome job. But that being said, I think everyone did a very good job in this game. He just happens to stand out. As for the music, I think the music is good. I don't think it's necessarily the most memorable music that you're going to hear, but I do think it's good and it really fits with everything anytime it's going on. And then you've got the sound effects, which are all very well done. I really don't have any complaints with them, whether it's the creatures, the magic, the attacks, just whatever's going on. I think the sound effects are very well done. And let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and Diablo 4 is an isometric action RPG. It's, you know, part of the grandfather franchise of that. And Diablo 4 actually feels more like a return to Diablo 2 than Diablo 3. That could just be because Diablo 3 evolved so much over time. But very much the, like, character screen feels like that from Diablo 2. And maybe it's just that, like, takes me way back. But like any RPG, you fight enemies, you complete missions, you gain XP, you use XP to level up. And the way they did it in this is very interesting. You unlock like a certain tier of skills, and you can pick one or more, I guess, if you want to. And then like you really kind of max that out, and you kind of map out your build. Like when I went through as a necromancer, I focused on blood and bone. Whereas when I was playing as a mage, I started like basically a lightning mage. Everything I was doing was lightning based. Now where Diablo 4 really differs from the previous Diablo games is that it's like a pseudo MMO. You are in a persistent world, there are other players running around, there are world events, there are basically not quite missions or quests, but like smaller world events as well as larger world events that other dudes can just roll up in or you can roll up in. But that being said, it's actually far less invasive than you would think. If you want to roll solo like I did, yeah, you'll stumble upon people, but you're not required to work with anyone. You're not required to team up for most things. There are larger events like, I don't know, like kind of like a world boss type thing where I sincerely doubt I could have done it alone, but you really don't have that option anyways because it's in the open world. But if you want to just do the campaign by your lonesome and focus on that, you can. If you want to focus on the side missions by yourself, you can. And a lot of the end game content you can do by yourself. But if you want to team up, you want to roll with people, you want to join clans, you want to do stuff like that, you can very much do that. There is quite a bit of stuff. You can focus on your story mission, but there's a ton of side missions that I barely even got to scratch the surface on. There's a ton of dungeons as well, and then there's endgame content, and there's plenty of it, as well as there's endgame leveling. So if you want to just keep going with one character and really max it out, you can put a lot of work into it, and I can't even begin to scratch the surface on that. I've seen several videos on it. It's pretty intense stuff. One thing I really enjoyed was once you've beaten the campaign and you start a new character, you can just skip the campaign. And that new character does start at level 1, but it puts you immediately in the end game. And while you don't have access to the story missions, you do have all the side missions, and then you have all the end game content. So leveling actually goes pretty quickly, and it works very well. And I just really enjoyed that for starting a new character. I think it made that kind of nice and just simple, which is kind of a throwback to what you could do in Diablo 3. The only time I really felt like it was getting invasive was when I wanted to pause and wander off or something like that. I couldn't really without getting kicked out of the game. And that's the other thing, is you have to sign in. I admittedly didn't have many problems with that. There was one time where it took like a solid 15 minutes, but that was the only time I ran into that issue. Every other time I logged in, it took less than a minute. And then I guess we'll talk about it. Yes, there is a real world currency shop, the whole microtransaction thing. It is purely cosmetic at this time, but it is also stupidly priced. I mean, you don't have to touch it. I, for the most part, ignored it. I looked at it for the sake of the review, and then I ignored it. But seriously, the prices are fucking stupid. But like any Diablo game, it's all about the loot. You kill things, you get loot, you equip yourself with better stuff, you sell loot, you scrap loot. When you scrap loot, you can use it to upgrade loot. I'm saying loot a lot, but you can upgrade all sorts of other things as well. There's still gem socketing. You can actually upgrade your health potions, in fact, which I thought was kind of a cool thing. You can remove like abilities from legendary items and plant them into other items. There's a ton of stuff, and I know I'm forgetting stuff because there is just so much stuff, and I mean that's fairly true of all Diablo games, or at least Diablo 3 very much so. This had a ton of stuff, and I was honestly satisfied with everything I touched, everything I used, all the challenges, all the missions that I did. From a gameplay standpoint, I was quite happy. I can very easily see this being that game that I now go to when I want to shut my brain down, listen to some music, listen to some podcasts, and just play. Now let's get into the controls, and I liked them. I think they work very well. If you've played Diablo 3 or Diablo 2 Resurrected, they will feel very familiar to you, and they work well. I found them very responsive. I didn't have any issues with the controls not doing what I want them to. And then last but not least, the graphics and visuals. First things first, the Diablo series, I mean Blizzard games in general, the cinematics have always been stunning, and that is once again very, very true in this game. But beyond that, the cutscenes in general I thought looked very good, and I liked the way they go from gameplay to cutscene. Like, they just merged it so well. This game has a much darker aesthetic than Diablo 3. It's very much meant to be hellacious, I guess, and grotesque. I mean, there's a mission where there's literally a skinned dude. I don't remember finding anything like that in Diablo 3. And while it's isometric, so you don't get all the greatest details, you can very much see enough to differentiate all the different enemies. You can really see some details in your clothing, which I think is really cool, and then seeing that clothing that you're wearing in the cutscenes is very well done. Just small details I think they really nailed, especially facial expressions and the acting in the cutscenes. I think they did a wonderful job with. And like always, one of my favorite things though is very much like small details, like footprints in the snow or the sand or the mud. One of the spells I was casting as a necromancer, it would like leave this divot in the sand when I was in the desert, and I thought that was just a cool detail to have. But going beyond that, it's all the special effects, all the effects for your attacks, for the different creatures during combat. Just all of that is so well animated. The magic looks sufficiently magical. The combat looks sufficiently brutal. I just think everything they did very well. They clearly put a lot of work into this game. There is one enemy, Astaroth, who I do think looks a bit silly. He's the only thing that really stands out to me visually as not fitting in the world, and I do wish they would redesign him, honestly. Because relative to like Lilith and the creatures you run into, he looks kind of comical. Fortunately, he's not in the game too much, so I can look past him, and I gotta say, I really just enjoy the design, whether it's the creatures, the spells, the clothes, the armor, the world. It's very clear what they were going for. They were going for a darker tone than the previous game, and everything they did visually helped land that, except for him. So to get into the wrap-up, I'm going to say I really enjoyed the game. I have no problem paying full price for this game. I really can say that I think pretty much anyone could have fun with this game, unless you're like, I only play sports games. But it's fun for casuals, it's fun for more hardcore individuals, you can really put a lot of thought into it, easy to pick up, more difficult to master when you're really building out a character and just putting that intense work in. But like I said, fully recommended, had a lot of fun with it, worth every penny in my opinion. I'm gonna be playing this a lot down the road. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, did you ever play the original Diablo? I played on the PS1 because I didn't have a PC that could run it way back then. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one. SPS. Say Diablo 3, like, it's very meant Ugh.